Welcome back to the Iron Sights podcast. I'm here with two of my besties, Jeff Chanel,
Hey.
Taylor Noriega.
What's up?
What's up? Good to have you guys back in the studio. Today is going to be centered around nutrition and dietary success. It's a common topic, people want to hear about it, but for us, this is a real passion of ours. Obviously, the fitness business, all the things we'd be remiss if we weren't having nutrition and lifestyle conversations with our clients when they come to us and want to learn how to lift weights and exercise and all that kind of stuff. So it's obvious, but at the same time, we've had our combined experience here is decades, combined amount of experience here with all different types of clients in all different types of settings. Everything from the person that's never addressed their nutrition or lifestyle at all to the highly trained athletes and everything in between. But the reality of it is most of the people that we deal with on a daily basis are people that are just trying to look, feel better and live better than their current situation. And they're trying to find a formula for themselves. And so I wanted to have you guys in here today so that we could talk through some of these formulas, because people have, by the time they get to us, they've been through maybe some kind of cookie cutter formula, like some templated program or whatnot. And I mean, my experience with that is it works until it doesn't.
Yep.
Yeah. So here's the deal. Here we have a couple of different ways that people can sort of get nutrition knowledge from us, as a company. And most of the time that happens either through people doing their self-research, right? Like people get their information by, whatever, the Google, Instagram, YouTube, whatever else. And there's a lot of good shit out there. But it doesn't speak specifically to them, right? It speaks about, there's a context missing to how does this impact me as an individual?
The answers are all out there. It's just how do you apply it to yourself?
Yeah,
that's what's not.
Right. It is all very individual. And I've said this before on the show, and that is if exercise programming is individual, right? And it is, right? Absolutely. Depending on your goal, depending on your history, depending on your ability, your fitness level, capacity, all of those things, then take nutrition with regard to the individuality principle and 10x it.
Yep.
It's that much more individual for a lot of reasons. And we're going to cut into some of those today. But at the end of the day, what we found is most people in their first 30 days of their program is super critical time. And it doesn't matter where they're coming from, right? What their goals are. We end up spending this first 30 days going through some almost always the same concepts. It's just specific to the individual. And so whether that's in our one-on-one program or in our self-guided nutrition success and education program that we have online called Fuel U, they basically get the same information. So we've tried to put this all together, and we want to talk through that a little bit today and give some people some context, but also some takeaways, whether they're into the programs or not. By the time they're done listening to this podcast today, they're going to have sort of the big rocks to walk away from this with and start to apply things that can start making impact right now in the next 10 minutes, right after this thing is over and beyond. And then they'll have resources to go to if they want more information from us, or, have questions for us. They can always reach out to us, but we obviously have those programs available. Taylor, give us an example of the last consult you had and what a person sort of came to you with in terms of what their goals were, what their challenges were, or maybe what their history was.
I have to say, so my last consultation was actually with a vegetarian. And those ones can be a little bit more straightforward, where it's very, very common that, they're eating a lot of carbs, probably not enough protein. It depends, right? So that's why we kind of go through the day of eating. And her goal was really just to, be healthy. She felt pretty bogged down at the end of all of her workouts. She wanted to feel more energetic. Obviously there's that weight loss goal, but she knew, I need to be feeling better in my activity before I can start losing weight. So it was a good thing she kind of came in with that awareness. A lot of people don't care, they kind of come in and they don't really pay attention to how they feel during their workouts. They're just focused on, I'm not losing weight. I'm not losing weight. I'm not losing weight. So that was my most recent consultation. This girl had more of a health and wellness goal, but a long-term weight loss goal. But she knew that there were little things in her diet that needed to be adjusted. Yeah.
So I think that's the thing. I mean, you mentioned it that earlier, that the information is out there for people, and people are coming to us more and more, let's just say, informed. Mm-hmm. I'm not going to say educated, because I think that's too big of a statement, but they're coming to us more and more informed about the things they maybe should or shouldn't be doing. A lot of times they're just confused and they don't have a depth of knowledge or, again, the context to be able to pull out the pieces that make the most sense for them. But this is a good thing still. It's a good thing for us as coaches, because what we find are people are fired up about their fitness, and they're reading and they're researching and they're at least connected to something, right? We used to be, as coaches, if I go back 15 years, right, we were information givers. Yep. All the information we were giving people was like brand new information to them.
Like gods.
Yeah. It was like, dude, this dude, like, like he knows everything. Right. And of course he does, look at him, or whatever. That was just kind of the thing. And then, the information technology started to evolve. We've got, again, YouTubes and Instagrams and the interwebs and whatever else. And so it was way more available to people, but it also created the space has just got ridiculous. Like anybody could get on and be an expert at anything.
It could be a dumpster fire.
Oh, total dumpster.
Misinformation sometimes.
And to the extent where I think now the industry in and of itself has started to police a little bit of that. And so have the consumers to where it's getting cleaned up. Thank God. But still the point of that is there's all this information out there. And now, rather than being givers, now we have to be interpreters. We have to understand what it is that our potential client or, our consumer has learned about or tried or been involved in or is indoctrinated into. I'll just go ahead and say it, and a lot of other things, so that we can start to connect with them at a better level. Like, oh, I read that too. Or I'm very familiar with this particular philosophy. Let me understand how you've been utilizing that in your life. So that way I can be more of a coach for you rather than a director, because we're not trying to change people's, complete outlook on everything that it is they're doing in their life. What we're trying to do is try to make more sense for them so that they can make better decisions.
Yes. Like looking at them where they are now, their history. So how they got to where they are now versus where they want to be. And so all of those aspects kind of come together in, again, directing them, coaching them in the direction of where they want to be ultimately.
Yeah. So the first 30 days, which is what I mentioned at the beginning, and you just said the word, is the history piece. So if I had to take the first 30 days of my coaching, I break it up, and we've broken it up here at Red Dot into kind of 4 weeks of, hey, everybody's an individual, but at the same time, there are some fundamental things people all need to be aware of. It'd be the same as entering in an exercise program, right? You have to build a little bit of capacity, right? You have to build a little bit of body awareness, proprioception, little strength, little endurance. All these things start to build on one another. And then you have a platform to really kind of do the sexy stuff, right? Like the cooler exercises and
all the ones on Instagram.
Yeah, and all the shit you see on Instagram, right? So we have to set this foundation, and we do that in week 1. We call that History Week. Right, where we sit and we really go through like what Jeff referred to as like an intake process. So whether that's an intake process between a client and a coach, or it's a self-assessment by a potential consumer on their own, bottom line is it's really important to go through and understand what your diet and exercise history has looked like, what your health history has looked like. Sometimes family history certainly plays a role there, but looking at the past before we start jumping into the now or even the future. So getting this kind of this understanding of where I am. And there's a lot of stuff that goes into that, Taylor. And I mean, maybe you want to talk a little bit about that, because I think most people would think, oh yeah, so what you want is like, how many diets have I been on? When was I my thinnest? When I got the fattest? When I was in the best shape of my life? These are the typical questions, right?
Yeah. But we have a whole other form of questions in the very beginning. I send them our what's been eating you form. And that kind of goes more into, honestly, the psychology and the history of why isn't this happening for you? And I think it ends up asking them a lot of questions that they haven't asked themselves before in the past. And which I think is good for people to dig a little bit deeper. It's not just, okay, what have I done? Where have you mentally been? Where, like mentally, psychologically, like what is your history there too? Because that's also the thing that's going to be preventing you from hitting the goals that you've always wanted to be hitting, right? That's why they're coming to me, because they can't seem to get to these goals that they want. So the history form does a really, really good job of just kind of helping them dig a little deeper. And it gives me a chance as a coach to learn more about them as a client.
Yeah, and some people are really good at doing this on their own. They can sit back and kind of reflect, and they may journal or just be introspective about the bigger picture. But I don't know if it was off air or is when we were talking now. But if you're coming in, if you're one of these people that's just coming, it's like weight loss, and you're feeling this like pressure, it's blinding. It's completely blinding. And it's just like, just tell me what I have to do. Tell me how many calories I should eat. Tell me what supplements I should take. Tell me how much or how little exercise I have to do. And I find that is something we have to immediately like get them to kind of snap out of. I'll call that kind of shaking their state, if you will, just kind of give them, rattle their cage a little bit with asking them to ask themselves. And then if you're obviously in the coaching situation, share what some of those things are. Can you give some examples of like some of the things we're asking people to reflect on?
Again, when were they successful in the past and why did that work? Okay. Why are you now in the state that you're in now? Very often they've regained that weight. They've either plateaued or the weight has come back. Okay, why did that happen? Do you know why? And more often than not, it's when they're in that mindset of like constantly being on program, off program, then that's exactly it. There's always an off program. So if you kind of let go of that mentality of like, okay, I'm going to be on program and I'm going to be really good, then there's no such thing as an off program and you don't fall off. And that's kind of where some of that mental, where some of the mental exercises and habit creation comes in. Yeah,
it's a little bit of gymnastics there at the beginning for people.
Off season is still scheduled, right? I mean, you might have an off season, but what are we doing there? I might be upping your fats. If you're an athlete, like what's going on, right? We're looking at you as an individual, and that off season doesn't mean, hey, I'm just eating whatever I want. Right. We're just getting more specific in trading, switching out macros maybe, adding more protein, whatever.
Planning for a certain event, a certain period of time where you may not have as much control or as much variety within your diet.
But to the average person that comes in off program is, I can go back to doing what I want.
It's either on the bus or off. So you've completely what they call the wagon. Yeah. You're either totally off the wagon or you're on the wagon. I hate that term.
And it's usually going from like diet back to excess, right? Like they're either going from, hey, I'm in a deficit, and it's usually a pretty crazy one, to where now I'm binging out, and they're like completely opposite. So 1,000 calories negative in their deficit, going back to 1,000 plus, right? Which after metabolic adaptation would be 2,000 in excess.
Mm-hmm. And more often than not, it's right before a vacation.
Yeah. So these are things that I think probably people can wrap their head around now. They may even be listening to this going, oh shit, that's totally me. Like, the holidays come, I put on 10 pounds, and then I spend the next 3 months over exercising and trying to figure it all out again, and whatever. We can talk about that, because that speaks basically by laying this foundation of where you've been. Like in the exercise is called What's Been Eating You, not what have you been eating. That this is going to be obvious questions. We're going to be doing that, but it's not quite time yet. Let's talk about what is it that's kept you from ultimately reaching your success. And it's not always that they're just on or off the wagon, but 99% of the time, consistency is the major player in whether or not they're having any kind of success there. Success is defined many different ways. I want to be clear about that. We're not saying this is a weight loss program, right? However, it's probably safe to say that most people want to lose a little bit of body fat, right? So we could call it somewhat of a fat loss. There's some fat loss stuff that goes into it, but at the same time, like, is that appropriate right now? And this week of history kind of understanding and then setting up for the next piece is super important, because then now we can start making some informed decisions about maybe what I should or shouldn't be doing as the weeks go on. Again, a lot of people come in, they got this high level of motivation, which I applaud, like, oh, I'm ready to do it this time. I'm really going to do it this time. Like, yeah, I love that. But let's pump the brakes, right? I don't want to take the wind out of your sails, but let's pump the brakes, because I got a lot of questions, or you should be asking a lot of questions right now before you jump in from the frying pan into the fire and go through your whole unsuccessful process again. So we're asking people to really take more than 2 steps back, maybe 3, 5, 6, 10 steps back to go, all right, let me put all this out in front of me. And then the bigger parts of this, and you alluded to this when we were talking earlier, Taylor, is the importance of that when things, you do seem to be getting off the rails, right? Because you have all this in front of you now, and as you maybe don't have the bandwidth to kind of deal with whatever's life thrown at you, and you're tired and you're not motivated and you haven't seen continued progress, you can go back to your baseline and where you originally started, and oftentimes it'll kind of put you right back on track.
Yeah.
So we've gone through kind of history, and it's people, I don't think, really spend enough time there. But then, I think where they do the next thing though is they want to jump right into what we would call week 2. And again, Fuel University. We spent some time looking at and talking about the math.
Yeah.
Right. I don't know, Taylor, maybe you want to expand on that.
Yeah, no, you're right. So people kind of want to jump right into that. But I think what the most important part about Fuel You is the fact that it's an education program first and foremost. So yeah, a lot of people will walk in being like weight loss, but they'll have gone through this vicious cycle over and over and over again, not truly understanding why. Why is this such a vicious cycle? Why am I always back where I started, or even worse from where I started? So the fact that it's an education program first and foremost just kind of teaches them that yes, we can get you to weight loss if that's your goal. But in the meantime, this is what's going to set you up for long-term success, so that we don't just crash diet you and then you're in a deeper hole than you were before. We set you up so that you know what's going on with your body, and you can carry this on long term for the rest of your life. And so that's kind of where the history piece is super important, because they learn a bit about themselves, and then we can step into the math, and then we can step into, okay, this is your calculated maintenance, right? So for your body type and your activity level, this is what you should be eating. And more often than not, I get raised eyebrows. I get people being like, I'm sorry, what?
How much?
Yeah.
That's a lot.
I came here to lose weight.
Yeah.
Exactly. And same thing with the protein too. They're like, you're kidding. Right. Like, no. This is like ×2. And I'm like, no.
So I think that's really important that we talk about that right there, because you're right. I mean, I've been doing this for a long, long time. And the first thing people look at is like, wow, that's a lot of food, or that's a lot of protein. And I go, as compared to what? As compared to what? As compared to what you've been doing, yeah. Which makes that history part so important, because then you can refer back to, well, how's that been working for you? Like you just wrote down, or you just, told me, or you've just journaled, or whatever it is that you're doing in your own process, that this hasn't been working for you. And you want a solution, right? And I want to help you with that solution. And part of the solution is understanding the reasons why. So we start with kind of internally in your history. And that helps me as a coach connect with you on how to have these conversations about the math, right? Because giving somebody a caloric prescription is not coaching.
It's not at all.
That's not coaching. You can do that on your own. And we provide the formulas for you to do that on your own. It isn't that hard, right? To kind of do some math. And again, there is no perfect number. So if that's what you're looking for anyways, like, you're never going to find that. But the point of it is to understand why, when you see that number, not to be alarmed, how it makes sense going back to education.
Yeah. And then even, yes, that's a calculated number for you, but is that the state your metabolism is in right now for that to be your maintenance? And so then that's the educational piece of week 2, is teaching them about metabolic adaptation. And that's kind of a really big moment for people, because again, it goes back to the vicious cycle. They don't understand why they're in this vicious cycle. Learning about metabolic adaptation, the first light bulb clicks on.
Yeah. So let's define metabolic adaptation. Cause again, I think it can be very confusing, but at the same time, like, we see people going back to when we were information givers before, when they hear this stuff and they start to look at their history and whatever, they look at us like, oh my God, you're so right about this. This makes perfect sense.
Education drives compliance, right?
Generally speaking, yes, unless that person just doesn't want to be helped anymore. Yeah. But
they're not ready.
Right, they're just not ready. Right. But let's talk about it. Let's talk about what is metabolic adaptation. So, again, people are coming in like we're trying to find these numbers. Let's talk about metabolic adaptation and why it's a good thing, and then how it is negatively impacting people,
and why the history and taking that intake form of how they've been eating is.
I mean, first and foremost, it's a survival mechanism. If your body followed calories in, calories out to a T, people would waste away in months. That's kind of how I describe it to people. And so, like, let's say your maintenance is supposed to be upwards of 1,800, but you've been eating 1,300 a day. Your body's going to figure out a way to live off of 1,300 a day. And there's a ton of stuff that happens internally. Like, we could really get into the science of it, as to how your metabolism ends up down regulating that much. But, first and foremost, usually at the cost of muscle mass. But I mean, again, at the end of the day, it's a survival mechanism. Your body kind of has to go through this process so that you don't die at 1,200 calories.
Yeah, and so you just said a couple of numbers there, and those are very common numbers, right? I mean, when we're working with, and I'll say it, like, again, all kinds of populations, but you're working with, let's say, the female population, and you tell them we need to start ramping your calories up closer to 1,800 calories a day, right? And they're currently eating 1,100 calories a day. They're freaking out. Yeah. I mean, there's like this visceral emotional reaction to, oh my God, because it's counterintuitive to everything that they've learned or they know. More calories means I'm going to gain weight, right? But you mentioned the term downregulation. So metabolic adaptation being your body will adapt to the demands, right? And the energy system, or the energy system will adapt to the demands that you're putting on it. And so there's all kinds of things that go into energy systems. So we can talk about the beta oxidative system.
Like your metabolism is literally every chemical equation going on in your body, and we don't know what processes it stops. That's the issue too.
It is so complex. At the same time, we don't have to overcomplicate this. What we do know we can have really great success with is getting people up to what you've referred to as maintenance calories, right, over time. And that's not something that can happen overnight. So if you've said it before, Taylor, like you're supposed to be at 18, or you should be around the 1800 number. It's not an absolute number again, but you're currently eating 1100. We need to get 800 more calories a day into your routine, but you're not doing that. So you trying to do that today and tomorrow is going to be absolutely miserable.
Digestive problems all over the place,
amongst other things, right?
Yeah.
You're going to hate eating. Yeah. You're going to hate you, the coach, right? You're going to hate the coach for making you do this, and it's going to sound
body composition also doesn't do good things when you try to do it that fast.
This is 90% of people that I come in contact with, and whether either men as well, the people that are men that are into lifting, usually under eating, and the women are always under eating and need a reverse diet.
Yeah.
In my personal practice,
almost always under eating. And again, it's, let's say they're undernourished and underfed, right? It's not every day, but it's most days. It calculates out from an average perspective that they're over, but they're doing things throughout the week, right? Like they get to the weekends, they become social or whatever else, and they're having 1 or 2 days a week where they're way over, right? And there is no consistency to the intake and or the expenditure that's going on. There may not be in a regular exercise program, right? So they're not, maybe they are, maybe they aren't, but but there's just these huge like peaks and valleys within the expenditure piece and the intake piece. And your body, the body in a sense is going to have a really rough time with that in terms of figuring out exactly where you need to be. So it's going to try to find where it's comfortable. And oftentimes that just means a downregulation of everything, of a lot of things, which can mean an upregulation of other things, which could be negative when we start talking about hormones and stress from a stress perspective, which we'll get into. But again, so it's not just about, a number and finding a number. The coaching comes in as like, okay, how do we get you to this in your current lifestyle? And there's ways for people to figure this out for themselves, right? If they walk through the process of doing it rather than just go, I have to get here. Yeah. That's a recipe for disaster.
Yeah.
For sure. I mean, you can totally for instance, if you wanted to have someone binge on the weekends and they wanted to lose weight and you were able to tally out all of that, they might have to fast on Monday. They might have to, restrict eating on Tuesday, but you could get to a point where that person could lose weight, right? It's just all about being aware of what's the average weekly and how do we get to that goal.
Right. And coaching somebody how to be aware of it and providing them some tools and some resources in how they might be able to do that effectively for them in their current lifestyle, taking a lot of things into account.
Because you're going to have to handheld that person for a while. They're going to have a little bit of pushback, right? You're going to gain weight. Like
sometimes,
it's okay. Right. And again, some people lose weight. Some people, as they start going up, it's like, dude, the body's just loving it.
Well, here's what's going to happen. One of three things is going to happen, right? When you start to go into this process of coming out of this metabolic adaptation, and we'll talk about it. There's kind of two ways you can come out of it. Right. So, and this is where when we start talking to numbers to people and like, you got to go from 11 to 18. How do you do that?
Reverse diet. I mean, recovery or reverse diet based on, the person, the history, things like that. Typically I get people who have been under eating for years or who have been crash dieting for years, in that vicious cycle. So, I mean, it's going to take upwards of 12 or more weeks on average, depending on how far under you're eating, and how long it takes you to get back up, because it's not going to be, a solid, okay, it's going to be 12 weeks for us to get there. That's it. Like, I can't say that, for certain. There's always a little bit of experimentation that goes on in the beginning, but typically if you're doing a reverse diet, your metabolism has downregulated, it adapted downwards, it can adapt back upwards as well.
So I want to add a specific to the reverse diet process. And this is for somebody that's been basically under eating for months to years. This is not like weeks. This is somebody that's been months to years, has been doing this and their body has down-regulated their metabolism, some of their hormonal responses and whatnot over a very long period of time. So we'll call this a reverse diet, and then we need to spend time. And you just called out about 12 weeks at least to start to climb out of this hole that they've created for themselves, right? That's a tough time. That can be a very tough time. You really have to embrace the process that you're going through, and especially the first couple of weeks in, really having sort of a support system to help you through, like, am I doing the right thing? Because you're going to wake up every day and you're going to wonder if you're doing the right thing when it's not going well. And guess what? There's a reality in all of this. 100% of the time, it's going to happen where things don't go well. Like that's just part of the process. It's life, right?
Yeah.
I mean, so
there's going to be failures everywhere.
You're going to run into these things. It's how do you learn from those? Well, why did I fail?
Learning the individual as well too.
Yeah. And so going back to the beginning, like connecting with yourself is important, but connecting with the coach can be uber important, because now they can be there not to do it for you, but to guide you and be, more of a support system, and then maybe help you find other people or other things to support you in your process. So again, reverse diet takes some time. We're talking about adding in what over a 12-week period. How do we reverse diet?
Yeah. So typically, I will add about 100 to 150 calories every 2 weeks, but only if that client is being consistent. Because if you're not being consistent and you're not hitting the numbers, I'm not going to increase you by another 100 over the next 2 weeks. So they kind of have to prove to me that they're really putting the time and the effort in to be consistent about, most importantly, calories and protein. Carbs and fats do still play a role, but most importantly, being as consistent as possible with your calories and protein. Every 2 weeks, we can increase you to about 100 to 150.
That's like 100, 150 a day within their daily intake, right? Not over the course of a week. So that would take forever, and you probably wouldn't get a good response. But to be clear, we're talking about like 100.
And we're also trying to minimize weight gain, right?
That's another important piece.
Yes.
Yeah. So again, this gives us a little bit more control with regard to titrating up versus having to, we went a little big at the beginning, a little big at the beginning. We have to titrate back. Not everybody's in the right frame of mind to do this though. Yeah.
I do have some clients where every check-in is the same pep talk over and over again. Long term, this is going to get you to where you want to be, and you'll sustain it, rather than, hey, let's just crash diet you now, and then we're going to have to reverse diet anyways later. You're just making that reverse diet a longer process. If we crash diet you now, rather than reversing you, getting you to maintenance, essentially preparing your body for the deficit so that it can efficiently lose fat mass on a deficit. And it's the same pep talk every single time, just to keep them on track and to keep them going. And once they kind of start seeing more of the fruits of their labor over the course of the program, is kind of when those pep talks start to come down a little bit. But there is a lot of like encouragement, just keep going, keep pushing, you're doing great. It's going to pay off in the long run.
So things to be aware of when you're going through this process, and that is, what are the things, because you're not seeing a weight loss on the scale necessarily, right? What are the things that a person can expect through this reverse diet process to be seeing and feeling like tangibly or intangibly? What are some of the things that they could hang their hat on and go, we're moving in the right direction. Like, I should feel good about this, but they're not aware of it.
Yeah. So fluctuations for sure. There's going to be fluctuations in your weight. But I mean, I think the best part is that, if done properly and if done, taken easy and slowly, we do see an increase in muscle mass for a lot of people, and even body recomposition as a whole. I can say that a majority of my reverse diet clients see an increase in muscle mass and a decrease in fat mass. And so that comes with a plateau in weight, or like a small increase, a little bit of fluctuation. It's kind of all over the place, but that's why we take body compositions every 4 weeks. So we can make sure, okay, cool, muscle mass isn't deep, you know what I mean? Muscle mass and fat mass are where we want them to be, but more often than not, we do see recomp.
Very important. So, right. And that is important. It's hard
to feel that little change in yourself, right? You look in the mirror, I look the same.
Yeah. There's a couple of things people need to be aware of. One, and then there's some biofeedback mechanisms that we'll talk about when we get into the science section. But I just want to touch on those now, that people should be aware of as they're going through this process. One, there's one of three things that's going to happen when you reverse diet. This is just the way it is. One, you're going to immediately start feeling better. You're going to lose a little body fat, maybe a little weight, a little body fat. You're going to have a little bit more energy, a little bit more steam in your workouts. You're going to be sleeping a little bit better. Maybe feel a little bit more springy on your feet. You're going to just feel it, and people are going to start saying stuff to you. Man, you look great. You're glowing, right? You can see it in your eyes, those kind of things. That's fucking real. And I see that happen a lot. It doesn't happen for everybody, but that happens a lot. The other thing that's going to happen is you're not going to change at all on the scale. Nothing's going to change on the scale, right?
I also don't want you to weigh.
However, you're starting to see your body change maybe a little bit, right? So you're seeing the recomping happen, but it might not be totally apparent to you. Like the waist is getting a little bit smaller, right? Like you're starting to maybe drop a little bit of that excess water that you may have been carrying based on the foods that you were eating or not eating. You're drinking maybe a little bit more water, which is pushing water. You're doing that. So you're starting to see that stuff. Maybe you're losing a little body fat and gaining a little muscle, and it's evening out, netting out on the scale, right? But if you're doing the reverse diet properly, oftentimes I'm feeling a little bit better. My workouts are a little bit better. I'm sleeping a little bit better. Like I have a little bit more drive. Like people are seeing it on my face. Hey, you look great. There's a little bit more pep in my step. Again, same thing.
My favorite is when they're working with a personal trainer and that trainer comes to me and is like, they just PR'd like last week or something, or like their performance is insane. And it's like night and day. It's really cool.
I just had that, and I'll share that with you in a minute. Last weekend I was in here and I had a conversation with a client. Before I do that, the third one is going to be, they're going to gain some weight. Right. And it's not going to be the positive weight loss on the scale immediately as we're reversing out of this metabolic adaptation or trying to change the adaptation. We're trying to adapt effectively in a different way. Adaptation is good.
Yeah.
We just need to adapt in the right kind of way.
Because it sounds like we're talking about it negatively, but like when the coach understands it, we use it to our benefit.
Yes.
Right. Once you adapt down, well, guess what? I'm going to bring you back up, get you back to that maintenance, and we're going to cut right back down. Right. So I'm able to stay within that 300 to 500 range. I don't have to keep going down to 1,000, 1,500. Right.
Right. So you're maybe gaining some weight, but again, you're feeling better. Like your workouts are going a little bit better. You're gaining some strength. You're getting a little bit more endurance. You're sleeping better. Those biofeedback mechanisms are starting to show up for you. The weight loss just isn't happening. And these are the three things effectively that are going to happen for you during that time. If you're really being consistent and doing your best to problem solve with your coach or on your own, that's what you can expect. This is going to be different, but similar to somebody that has not been under eating or under feeding for months to years and super downregulated. They've been doing it maybe for a shorter period of time, maybe weeks, let's call it 2 to 6, or maybe as long as 12 weeks. If you've got somebody that's maybe in like a competitive sport, or they do like bodybuilding or figure shows or something like that, to where they do take themselves into a deficit. When you do that, things are going to downregulate. Your body's going to metabolically adapt. And at the end of that, though, we would refer to that more as a recovery diet rather than a reverse diet. So I think it's important to define those two, right? Reverse diet is somebody that we are having to kind of reset the entire system, which could take months to more than a year. It could take years, for some people. Generally speaking, if they can be consistent for 3 months, we've seen some amazing results, right? And they're more than happy with those, and they get it. The rest of the journey might be different, but that first 3 months are really getting it. In the recovery diet, it's something that has a lot more awareness of exactly what they did and how they did it, in terms of the caloric deficit they put themselves in. It may have been a little bit more organized. They knew exactly what they were doing with their macro and micronutrients, what they were doing with their exercise, and they can formulate a plan that almost is a little bit more linear. And they can see it happening in front of them versus the person that's reverse dieting, where the vision isn't so clear.
It was all in the dark before. And so now we're trying to clear up the vision moving forward.
So somebody trying to apply a recovery diet, that is almost templated, right? To some extent. You're
basically reversing back to exact steps that you came down on your cut. You're like, okay, I did 200 calories minus here. I'm going to literally the next week, 2 plus. I'm going to work back to my maintenance from my cut.
But it can be a faster process than
it can be a much faster process. And generally those people are not going to put on body fat as quickly, right? And that because their body is almost primed, right? To now put that muscle back on, because I'm moving into a surplus, the body's just kind of soaking it up. It's a great time.
Yeah. Maybe they had planned diet breaks and things like that to preserve the metabolism in the meantime while they're in that deficit phase. Whereas somebody who's just been under eating all their life, there's no preservation. There was nothing there. So
the recovery diet could be a little bit of a faster process, which doesn't yield as much maybe body fat recomposition as the recovery diet does. And I think it's important for people to understand that because, again, they're very informed. They're hearing all these things out there. That is not appropriate for you. That recovery diet is not appropriate for you if you've been this person that has been on the diet train for months to years and still is not eating at maintenance or hasn't been doing that for a very, very long time. So I think that's important. All the biofeedback stuff, by the way, on the recovery diet tends to show up very quickly. People immediately start feeling better and they know, and they're like, God, I was just waiting for this. Now imagine, and I'm flash forward a little bit. Imagine if you were a person, you're not a competitive bodybuilder, right? You're not a competitive athlete, but you thought about ahead of time, right? And planned for the diet breaks that you just mentioned and this deficit period that you were going to go through, and knew on the backside of that, there could be some recovery time to come back out where you could eat up. I'm just going to kind of leave that on the table because we're going to talk about that a little bit later in this other part of the conversation, which we call periodization. But as we're into this recovery diet and metabolic adaptation, so important for people to get that and understand that. Even more important that they have tools to deal with the process and understand that this is a process that you have to embrace it, right? So the understanding what's going on in your body during this time is really important, I think, because this goes back to the education drives compliance piece that Jeff was mentioning. You got to understand that what is happening, right? And it's this, your body's having to kind of switch back on and come back to life in a sense and learn how to do things differently. And if you want to make change, you're going to have to do things differently. It's the bottom line. And your body will have to learn that along the way.
And it's one thing for me to tell them like, hey, when we reverse diet, these are the 3 things that are going to happen to you, versus when it does start happening for them. That's kind of when the next light bulb clicks on for them and they really start to trust the process. And then things really start happening and it goes a little smoother after that, especially for the ones that need the pep talk in the very beginning. But yeah, the education drives compliance and then the progress drives compliance.
Yeah. And I think, ways to check in on yourself or check in with your coach are really easy ways. Cause you as the participant in the program aren't always noticing the changes. It's 3 or 4 weeks down the line where you see that coworker you haven't seen for a while, that family member you haven't seen for a while, and they go, oh my God, you look fantastic. And you're thinking on the inside, I haven't lost a pound, but you've recomped and they can see that on you 4 weeks in or whatever the time period is. That's one way. So we encourage people to do pictures, right, of themselves. These are private pictures where you can see, because a week down the line, you might, God, I'm doing all this work. I'm meal prepping. I've been doing all this shopping. This really sucks. It's taking up all this time. But you see your before picture in 1 week or a week later. And what would you reasonably expect? Not a ton, but the next week and the next week and the next week, you may be able to see you should be able to see some physical results in that amount of time that are more tangible to you rather than some of the biofeedback stuff. So this is a phrase that I think people, going back to the being informed and the embracing the process, they have to understand. And you just mentioned this in a different way. And that is, the physiological changes are going to happen before the physical change happens. You're going to have to impact the physiological stuff, the upregulation of your metabolism, right? The secretion of more hormones, of the ones that are going to help you through this process, while the other ones maybe that have been upregulated that we don't want upregulated start to dial back. These are all things that are happening internally. All of that stuff generally impacted by diet and lifestyle, and obviously exercise is an important piece. Physiology has to change before you're going to start seeing the physical change, and you got to have your head wrapped around that. Mm-hmm. Right? So as we move past that, I guess our next week then is talking about what I just kind of alluded to, which is the science piece, and trying to get people to maybe see that there is science involved here. There's human physiology, there's human psychology, right? There's neurology that's involved here. There's all kinds of stuff in this adaptation process as we're trying to adapt to a new. Maybe we can talk about that.
Yeah. So, the science piece is pretty much like sleep and stress management, which what I like to explain to people, it's like the base, the foundation of health, right? So you could have like the perfect diet, you could have the perfect exercise routine. But if your sleep and your stress management isn't in place, that's going to be a big hindrance in results. You are not likely to see the results that you are going for because that's where recovery happens, right? And if we don't have recovery, we don't have results.
Yes. Yeah. So boom. The adding up, or because this is piling on of all the things that are kind of going on in life, and stress is not a bad thing. It's a very natural thing, right? It's the amount of stress we expose ourselves to both internally and externally, it's that cumulative stress, that buildup, right? That stacking up that we need to be aware of. And no matter what your situation is, how positive it is, or how negative it is, everybody is going to have to deal with this.
They're going to have everyone kind of has low grade stress consistently, right? Back in the day, it was like, oh, a tiger came at me. I was like, oh, right. Turned, ran, and I was like, okay, I'm good. Now it's like, my boss is calling me. I've got work, I've got kids, my wife, A, B, C, and D, whatever it is for you that's constantly eating at you is going to have a huge play on your cortisol, muscle growth, all of that.
Yeah, and in both situations, it's the same cortisol response. Yeah, and that's what I explain to people.
Any stress.
Yeah.
Expand on that.
Yeah. So so like you guys said, there's always going to be stress, right? There's a natural ebb and flow to our cortisol. However, if, there's that constant work stress, family stress, all that undealt with stress that's piling on and is chronically elevated, your cortisol is then going to be chronically elevated, right? And so we need elevated cortisol every once in a while, but we also need it to come back down if we ever want to recover. So instead of, how I like to describe it is, instead of letting your cortisol ebb and flow up here, we want it ebbing and flowing down here, because then there's no recovery. You're constantly in fight or flight. Your body's constantly on the edge of its seat. Like, okay, what do we need to run from? And then, there's no relaxation. There's no time for your body to relax and go, okay, cool. We can let all these other processes in our body, go down. So that's kind of how I like to describe it to people when it comes to the importance of, hey, really take a look at the stress in your life. Is it like impacting you every single day? Or do you have moments where you actually like feel at peace? You feel like you can rest and you can recover and, you feel peaceful inside, I guess.
Your 4 days of exercising at, level 100, right? You're under feeding yourself by 800 calories. You're not sleeping, 6 to 8 hours a night. I'm going to say 6 is on the bare minimum side of things, sure. Right? And this is sort of what we know through science now too. We just know people do better when they get closer to 8 hours of sleep a night. You're not doing that. Now take work, life stress that's going on, take relationship stress that's going on, and then take the pressure that you're just putting on yourself for not being good enough, right? Or not doing the things that you think or you should be doing in the way that you should be doing them. And then couple that with any of the bullshit that you're exposing yourself to throughout the day through, social media, the news, whatever, these negative conversations and whatever else, what that adds up to is recovery debt. And if you are not repaying that bank account with downregulation, right? And that could come through calories, that could come through increasing your calories, increasing your macronutrients, increasing your micronutrients. That could come from down-regulating how much exercise you do. Maybe you should be exercising less, right? And taking more time off, right? That could be, again, practicing new sleep and stress management protocols. It's doing all kinds of stuff, shutting phones down if that's what it is, planning time with the family so that, it's not stressful time. We're not running around. It's maybe doing less things socially, right? So you're not feeling like you're being pulled into those things. This is a large part of nutrition coaching. And it's a huge part of this conversation we're having right now. And it's a large part of what the Fuel University program is in getting people to just be aware of this. What are the things in your life that are contributing to your recovery debt, right? And how can you change those? But what's really important to understand is, look, life happens and we have responsibilities. So you have to understand your non-negotiables. That goes back to like that intake or that history piece. Like, what are the things you're absolutely not willing to give up? Let's understand what those are so that we can make accommodations down the line. And so when we get into the science piece, you're talking about the stress and the recovery piece, like we have to understand what those are, how they impact us. And they might have been a non-negotiable in week 1, but by week 6, people are like, dude, this is the reason. Like, this is the reason I'm drinking too much, like drinking 4 nights a week is killing my sleep because it's killing my sleep. It's killing my workouts. It's wrecking my motivation. Like, and I know those aren't the calories that I need to be eating or whatever else. Like they start to recognize like I'm not going to give up my 3 glasses of wine a week, which is usually 6 glasses of wine, or whatever it is. Like, but understand what that is, understand what those non-negotiables are, because they're going to show up. And when it starts getting hard, like that recovery debt is piled up and maybe you've not managed it correctly. You said it earlier, Taylor, and that is go back to the history piece, go back to that shit you wrote down in week 1 because I guarantee you it's showing up again now, and you haven't made the change that you need to make. I don't know. Are there any other things that happen for you, like with your clients, or examples you want to provide with regard to like what happens in that kind of that stress and sleep management section? What kind of tools are available for them that you provide them or that they can use?
Well, so there's like a whole list of just kind of like meditative practices and like things that they can do mentally when it comes to stress management. You know, my biggest thing because a lot of the times I get people who come in, yes, if they're working out too much and they're under eating by too much, that's going to be the first thing that we go after. I can't tell you how many people I've had who work out 6-7 days a week. And I'm like, okay, you're not eating for that. So we either need to, reverse diet you up to that, or you need to give me an active recovery day, or you need to give me 1 or 2 rest days. And then all of a sudden things start falling into place, right? But more often than not, I get people who are just constantly stressed about work, or they're constantly stressed about something. And there's a lot of different things that we can do, journaling, mindfulness, meditation, because, there's controllables and there's non-controllables that this is kind of how I lay it out for people. The controllables, how do we face those? How can we fix those so that they're not causing as much stress as they're causing you? The non-controllables, okay, how do we manage how we react to those stressors right there? So yeah, you're right. There's multiple different ways that stress can come in and for us to be able to release it. But more specifically on like the mindset piece, there's a ton of different things that we can do based on the type of stress that's coming into your life. Yeah,
so important because it's never just about the food. Right. It's never all about the food that we eat. There's the things that we're feeling, like from a stress management perspective, absolutely impact our behaviors on how we eat, what we eat, when we eat. And obviously we know the ramifications of not doing that consistently. And that's why we're here, right? That's why we're having this conversation. So it's, it might sound weird to people. No, man, all I want you to do is give me the caloric prescription, keep managing my macros week to week. Am I losing weight? Am I not losing weight? Look, any coach, quote unquote coach, can do that. That's not coaching. And that's not reality for most people. Because if it was, then everybody would be at their goal weight. Like everybody's just, all you get is,
do you know how many apps there are for that?
There's a million of them. What there isn't an app for.
All the clients that come in use it too.
Yeah, there's a ton of apps out there that can be useful tools, right? In understanding the bigger picture. And we use some of those tools. Like I like MyFitnessPal because it gives me access. It integrates directly with our online app that we have. So I can see all of your stuff right in front of me right now. Like I can see what you're doing. It's not there for me to nitpick and tell you how shitty you're doing or that you're not meeting your goals. It's for me to have a better understanding and a better connection with you with what are the things that you're challenged with so that we can make the adjustments, right, to the behaviors or the exercise or the caloric intake throughout the week and throughout the month. And we don't do this forever. Some people love to. I mean, Jeff, you've been pretty candid about you track everything all the time.
Dude, I'm an under-eater and I have a hard time eating. I got to wake up and eat a meal first thing just to make sure if my first meal is at 10 or 11, I'm not hitting my calorie goals. Just
period.
Bottom line, it's not happening.
So you can either throw your hands up for the rest of the day, or we can figure out a way to manage through this. Cause maybe that's the thing. Maybe, all right, well, maybe I'm not going to eat till 10. So how do we manage through this?
And it's all about making those small changes that work for that individual's life. I can't just be like, oh, well, this is what I did and it worked for me, so you go ahead and here you do it. Right. You find the small changes, the small adjustments that work for that person's life, because everybody at the end of the day probably has 10 plus things that they need to work on. As a coach, I'm here to help you prioritize and how do we make it work for your life rather than make you feel like, oh, this is a chore and like, I have to do this every single day because I know it's good for me. No, how do we make it a habit that's becomes subconscious?
Right. And once a person or participant in a program sort of acknowledges and confronts that, it becomes that much easier. It doesn't mean they're going to be perfect at it, but having, again, somebody in your corner to help you manage through this process sort of in the beginning stages can save you so much time, so much aggravation, and put you back on the right track when you don't maybe realize you're getting off track or for the reasons that you are, which then sets you up. Now you have experience. Now we can call this wisdom. Now I don't just have the knowledge of how I'm feeling, but I have the wisdom in how I can deal or how I've dealt with that in the past and what's worked and what hasn't, as compared to my previous past before maybe working through a coaching program or something else. So now I can start to put these things together to understand the formula that works specifically for me. And so speaking of formulas, as we're going down the path here, all of this stuff kind of works out to, well, shit, how do I manage this every day of my life for the rest of my life? Right? This sounds very daunting. it will be, if that's your outlook on it, it will be very daunting, right? But if you step back and you go, how do I make these habits my lifestyle? And so one of the concepts that we mentioned earlier was this concept of periodization. And I don't think it's talked about enough in the nutrition world, or nutrition coaching world. We talk about it all the time in fitness and in exercise programming. And effectively, we know that for certain periods of time, you can be working on some very focused things. Maybe you're going through like a hypertrophy phase. My goal is some muscle growth. I'm going to do that for 2 to 3 months. It could be shorter, it could be longer, but generally 2 to 3 months, I go 8 to 12 weeks here. And then after that, I've sort of primed myself for more of a strength phase. Right. So then I spend 2 to 3 months in more of a strength phase. My volume changes, my intensity changes, maybe my exercise selection changes. My frequency might change, frequency of workouts or rest times or whatever. I might be adding in some different modalities that I wasn't in there before. And then I move maybe into more of a power phase. Now things change dramatically. Now my volume goes way down, but my intensity goes way up or whatever the case might be. And then I go through like a recovery phase, maybe a deload. Right. And I could be deloading in between them. There's all these different phases within the exercise program that make sense so that we're managing the recovery, right? And maximizing the effect of the work that we're putting in. It's the same in nutrition.
Yep.
And going back to the exercise program, if that's the way you're managing your exercise program, then your nutrition, damn it, that should be periodized too. Because if you're doing the same thing and expecting to maximize your hypertrophy, your strength, your power, your endurance or recovery phases or whatnot, you're not managing that nutrition along the way in the same type of way, you're not going to be ultimately successful.
You're doing yourself a disservice there.
Yeah. So let's talk about like, how do you manage the concept of, nutrition periodization?
Yeah. So, how I like to put it, because for the average person, when it comes to periodization, periodize around your life, right? So look at a calendar, January to December. Where are the big events? Where are the vacations? Where are the times where okay, I'm not going to track during this period. I have this goal by the end of the year. Okay, great. How do we periodize for you? So you have a deficit in certain parts of the year, and then you've got a diet break. You have like a strategically placed diet break or a maintenance phase for when you are on vacation, or, you want this deficit phase to be successful for this wedding that you're going to. So how do we break it down and create little cycles for you so that you can get to where you want to be at certain points of the year, or so that you can manage your long-term goal throughout the entire year while not being antisocial and pulling out of events just because you're like, no, sorry guys, I'm tracking.
Yeah. We hear that a lot. Like, it's miserable. I don't want to, I'm not going to go to the birthday party because I'm going to eat cake. Fucking eat cake.
Yeah.
Let's just plan for it. Like,
if you want to track that cake and just be like, hey, okay, there's my calories, and just
bring your scales
or don't track for that day. Jump back into it and then tracking the following day. It's okay to do those things. It's not going
to ruin you.
Mm-hmm.
But we're not having cake every week. We're not having it every day. We're not having it multiple times a week, whatever. And I use the cake analogy. It's a little dumb, but maybe not, because cake could be eating out with your friends or eating out with your family more free. I'm just going to say too frequently, because if your goal is to find caloric maintenance, whatever, and you're eating out all the time, you're going to have a tougher time than the person that's cooking at home, which is, again, that's a personal choice that you're going to need to make, but you're going to have way more sort of control and consistency when you're doing it that way, meal prepping, or even going through some type of more controlled meal prep type of company or somebody that you're reaching out to. Mm-hmm. But going back to the periodization, here's what the periodization tends to look like. Tell me if I'm wrong. So let's just start the period, or let's just talk about a year. Right, a 1 calendar year, and we'll start at January 1st. What's generally happening January 1st? Well, people have
new year, new me.
Right.
I'm thinking summertime coming.
Right. So the typical average Joe, right, comes in, and it's just like, fitness is a different animal, man. The first of the year, people are like, okay, fuck. I just spent since Thanksgiving to Christmas, I put on like 10 pounds. I need to get my shit back together. So they get back into the gym, right? And you see the typical, well, I'm just choosing a program that's convenient, that I can afford, that Susie over there lost 10 pounds doing this program, so that's the one I'm signing up for too. Those are the types of sort of emotional decision-making processes that we see people going through. Mm-hmm. There's no plan. It's just, I know I need to exercise and I know I need to change. So the easiest thing they can do is get back involved in some kind of exercise, or go sign up for some membership somewhere, some program. Generally speaking, not a lot of thought goes into that about the longer term. And that's why the fitness industry sees such a high amount of attrition in the first, 2 to 3 months of the year. Because people are like, oh, I'm doing it. But there was no plan. And they signed up for something, but a lot of times it was the wrong thing for them because it wasn't planned. It wasn't assessed. And anyway, long story short, it's the same with nutrition. So, all right, all the cookies, the pie, the holiday foods, all the social gatherings, those all kind of come to a close. So I'm going to start to do things. And to the point that was made earlier, they were already under eating going into the holiday season or whatever it is, that 2 months before. Then they started to move into a surplus, and they did it very fast. It wasn't the 150 to 200 or the 100 to 150 calories a day for maybe a week at a time. It was, they're going ham like right away. It's the holiday party. They just put down an extra 1,000 calories.
Yep.
How does the body respond to that? Not favorably, right? So that's why you see the fat
Energy
gain.
Storage.
That's why you see the fat gain, right? So now they're in a surplus, and they've been in a surplus, but their macronutrient profiles are generally jacked up, right? Again, a lot of alcohol, a lot of maybe their carbohydrate number is way out of whack, whatever the case, fat intake, all that kind of stuff. But they're sitting in the month of January, and they're already knowing I should be not drinking as much, right? I should probably not be eating these things anymore. They're not as available as they were to me before. So now I start to move back towards whatever that original number was. Now, maybe the extra 500 calories a day they were getting got them up and above maintenance. Maybe they put on some weight, but now they go the exact opposite extreme and they take it all out again. And what happens?
They downregulate all over again.
They start downregulating. And often if you've entered into an exercise program, you're going to start to see some weight loss and validated. This is working, right? I'm losing weight. See, I knew it, right? And that happens for about 4, 6, maybe 8 weeks. And then what happens? Because everything's downregulating, you're continuing to exercise, you stop seeing that weight loss or that result. Here's the point. Then it starts into this whole poor behaviors, poor decision making. I'm gonna do this crash diet. I'm gonna do this juice cleanse. I'm gonna do this fucking diarrhea tea. I'm gonna do all of these things to try and get out of this situation that I've created myself in, and they've jumped right from the frying pan back into the fire. Imagine if, going back to Jeff's point, right? He looked at January as his bulking phase, right? And he's not cutting back. He's continuing to add on. He's lifting heavier.
It's cold outside. I got a sweatshirt on.
Right. He's lifting heavier. From a diet perspective, look, you've already been eating up. Treat the holidays as your bulk. Eat up, right? Especially knowing that, to your point, Taylor, earlier, like you got this vacation coming up. You've got this thing you're trying to do. There's this period of time during the year where you want to maybe quote unquote cut or lose some body fat or go into a deficit. That's coming. Let's plan for it. Mm-hmm. Let's put some periods together in our nutrition program where we see it out in front of us and we can plan for it, where we stay at maintenance or we're above maintenance for certain periods of time, or we drop below maintenance for periods of time. So we're not going back to a reverse diet. We're going through a bulk phase, which is eating in a surplus. That's all that is, right? And then we go into a recovery diet, which would be coming out of the deficit that was planned for us the entire time. We know what our numbers are supposed to be, or our macronutrients should be. It plays into our lifestyle. It plays into our vacation. We know we're going to feel a little shitty when we go into the deficit, but we also know it's not going to be for too long. And once we start feeling a little bit like, I'm not feeling so great, I'm not recovering, guess what? We start to put the calories back in. People live like this. So the people that are listening going, oh God, like I would love that, like to know what I was doing was working for me, and I could constantly ebb and flow, as you said, through these cortisol patterns, through the ups and the downs of the calories. That isn't how people approach it. It just isn't.
It's very black and white. It's like January 1st, no sweets, no alcohol, nothing, deprive themselves, and then binge like a couple of weeks later. Right. So whereas instead, like you're saying, it's like if they came at it at a calculated approach and, okay, this is my deficit period. They understand that, hey, as long as I'm in a deficit, I'm hitting my calories and my protein. I can still enjoy, cake once in a while. I can take my diet breaks and everything like that. And then, for example, March, April, let's just like say, for example, they're doing an 8-week deficit phase. That's all they need. And then this way in May, they can work on their recovery diet back into maintenance and then be in maintenance over the summer at the body weight that they wanted to be at. And it's way more calculated on top of the fact that it's a lot better for your body composition than if you were like, I'm going to crash diet in May, so by June, I'm good to go.
Right. You can't, if you're starting this process though in January, expecting you to be good in June,
a long time.
That is, you got lots of time to do a lot of work, but if you've been severely under eating, up until that point, and you're in that, again, that metabolic adaptation hole, you're on the downside of it, you can make a lot of progress in 6 months. That is for sure. But to be operating at your optimal level by that amount of time is not really rooted in a lot of good logic and or reality. This is a longer term process. But if you, the other part of this is, and we've talked about this on other podcasts before, is like this tracking and this understanding of finding balance. Like you start out and you get this strong understanding of where you are, from a macros perspective, maybe from a caloric intake perspective, how the things affect you, what types of foods work well for you versus what types don't based on the exercises you're doing, all this other kind of stuff. You do this long enough, you don't have to be glued to the MyFitnessPal or the exercise tracker or whatever. There still needs to be some checking in. I think it's always good for people to go back and have some accountability through those things. But this is something you can start to manage on your own. And when you feel like you're going off track, now you have the tools, right, to go back to and go, wait. Like I'm gaining more fat than I want to be gaining here. What am I doing? And you've got this baseline to be able to revert back to because you have this education about yourself and you're not reaching for somebody's program. It's your program, not the fucking 30-day challenge that I see people doing. That is not what Feel You is. It is not a 30-day challenge. We didn't crack the fucking code on 30-day challenges. What we're talking about doing is giving you 30 days to help you start down the right path of figuring your shit out, right? And understanding what works for you, not how much weight can you lose, right? How do you put yourself in the best position to lose as much, gain as much, maintain as much, and be happy and healthy and vibrant, along the way. And that plays, I think, more into the last week and the last section, which we call the psychology section, which would be, again, we've gone through history, math, science. Now we're in the psychology, which can be the toughest part for most people because this is a lifestyle. It's not a 30 day. Anybody can do anything for 30 days.
It's also hard. Like you're talking about the mindset. It's very hard to tell a woman, like you might not ever have a visible six pack. And to be honest with you, that low of a body fat just isn't healthy for you. They're kind of like, wait, what? I want to like all these actresses have six packs. And
right.
it's a hard conversation, right? A bunch of the women that I know that compete don't have periods.
Yep.
Is that healthy? No.
Maybe not, right? Yeah.
I'm going to say no.
Yeah. I'm going to say that too. I mean, when you're at a certain age, obviously, but yeah.
The younger women, that are, and it's taking them a while to even come back and have kids. Like, they want to have a kid and the doctor's like, dude, you need to up your body fat. You need to, stop working out so much and get back to a normal hormonal level. Right. So, wrapping around that. Yeah.
Yeah. The health and wellness piece it sometimes clashes with the aesthetics piece that a lot of people tend to come in with their heads wrapped around. And then that's a really tough part about psychology is, we have to figure out how do we make these two pieces work together. My biggest thing is like, I want you to look good, but I want you to feel good too.
So important.
Yeah.
I mean, we just did a podcast on weight loss after pregnancy. And one of the first things, in there in the guide that we wrote for that was making sure that you're in a solid mental and emotional health state. Like psychologically, is this the right time for this? When we get into the psychology component, this is very important because Jeff, you just call out we have to look at what the reality is. Like, what is the reality of your situation? And you may not, picking out a picture in a book again, or a magazine or an Instagram, say, I want to look like that. 99% of the time is not realistic for most people. Like, let's go down the journey and let's see where we are in 2 months and let's reevaluate. And then we'll go another 2 months and then we'll reevaluate and we'll kind of see through this journey what makes sense. And I've heard you say this a million times, Taylor, is like clients come in and they have this like vision or this visual picture of what they want to kind of look like in their head. And I think that's important. It keeps them motivated and gives them some direction. But then they recognize like a few weeks down the road, like in maybe even a couple months down the road, how little importance that actually plays in the bigger picture because they feel good, right? And when they feel good, and again, this is the feelings are not just this sense of, well-being, but there is an actual physiological well-being that's happening. Hormones are maybe a little bit more balanced because they're eating the right amount of calories, right? They're not overtraining. They're getting sleep. They're waking up. That cortisol response is more managed on an even keel level rather than the peaks and the valleys, which cortisol will do.
Waking up at 3 a.m. like, ooh, ready to go.
Yeah. I mean, going to sleep may not be a problem for you, but for a long time, staying asleep was an issue for me, and it had everything to do with my lifestyle. At the time, I cleaned that shit up. I sleep like a baby, right? Like it's when I don't sleep, I immediately look at myself and go, what am I not doing that's contributing to me not sleeping? It's not what do I need to add to the plate. Exactly. It's generally what do I need to take away?
Just looking at the metrics and being like, where am I missing here to have this come back? Right?
So the metrics are so important. And again, people get afraid of that. And I hear people, this philosophy of, well, people don't need to measure. They don't need to track. Well, I have a problem with that, because if you don't understand where you are, how do you know where you're going?
Unconscious incompetence.
Yeah, I think I have a problem with that. Not everybody needs to track forever, right? Yeah. And I think certain people need to track less, and some people need to track more. But to say, oh, you should be able to do this without tracking, I got to be honest. I'm going to be real blunt here. I've been doing this for a long time, and I have not seen that philosophy play out well, or that methodology, play out well for the majority of people.
At least not in the long term.
No, not for the long term. In the short term, maybe, but not in the long term, because when the going gets tough or when a curveball gets thrown at you, where do you go from there? You're just going on feel. You're driving by braille. And I don't think that that's a solid plan for long-term success. And again, there is no perfect number or metric, but understanding what yours are, I think, are really important.
Just a ballpark range, right?
So going back to the psychology piece is getting your head a little bit around that and understanding why those things are important. Not that they have to run your life, but those things are important. And they put the coach in a really solid position to be able to help you toggle the switches, twist the dials, right? And that's not what coaching is. It's not always toggling switches and twisting dials. It's teaching people how to go to the right dial for them and play with that dial or that switch in order to make the impact that they're trying to make. It's leading the horse to water, right? Yep. And we're hoping to make them very, very thirsty. Right? I can't make you drink the water, and I'm certainly not going to hold your head under the water to make you drink it, right? But I hope that you get so thirsty that you want to drink it, and then that puts us in a much better position. But there's a few things that go on in the psychology piece. It's understanding what's realistic for you, what isn't, what's worked for you in the past, what you need to be doing now. We talked about metabolic adaptation, periodization. We start to cover these things in a way that I think is, for lack of a better term, very digestible for the average person to get, and very, very telling for people that have had a lot of experience in their own diet history and worked in other programs where it's been all macro prescription or all caloric prescription. They've just been getting managed week to week with numbers. I think they can pull a lot out of it. But there's other things that go into the psychology piece.
Yeah. So there's habits, there's habit forming as well. So there's kind of a whole piece in there where it basically just like takes them through the process of creating habits. Does this work for your life? Okay, yes, there's 10 to 20 things that we could probably be working on. How do we prioritize and work on one or two at a time? Boom, those are set. Those become subconscious. What are the next ones that we need to work on? Because habit forming is huge. That's another key to long-term success. Mm-hmm. The other key point in that last week is just mindset, because motivation isn't going to last forever, right? Day one of those 3 months, they're fleeting. Super motivated. Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. You're going to hit a wall. There's going to be days where you're like, oh my God, I don't feel like doing this. Or, the tracking feels like a chore. And then there's that intrinsic drive. Like what is driving you to do this so that you can take care of yourself, see those long-term goals? What is it like in the back of your mind that's going to, help you keep going even when motivation is like gone? But another important piece there that I like to make sure that people understand is that there's also a fine line between lack of motivation and burnout.
Yep.
Do you need a break, or is your motivation just dwindling?
Yeah. And knowing when you're feeling that coming, or at least knowing how to take a step back and re-examine, like, is this a time where I just need to kind of step away from this? Not forever, but for now, and have a plan to step away. And these are the things I'm going to do while I'm doing that. And then not making random, willy-nilly sort of decisions, but they're they're informative decisions, right? They're based in rationale. And that's what you're trying to give this client along the way, or we're trying to give them through the program, is a rationale for why they're doing or why they could be and should be doing what we're presenting to them. It's not reinventing the wheel. Like, nothing that we've put in there is proprietary information, but there are tools within these programs that we found to be really successful. We've sort of like taken all the best of the things that we've learned and all the worst of the things that we've learned, and we've tried to carve through it. How do we pull it out and present it in a way that people can do it kind of on their own time, right? And they can, in a sense, choose their own adventure. Because I think that's important. If you lock them into this, we've said this is kind of a 30-day, 4-week program. We find the people that get the most success, they'll really focus and kind of hunker down in that first 30 days. And what they're seeing in that first 30 days of that Fuel You program, or when they're working with their coach, it's different. With working with their coach, they're getting, biweekly, meetings where they get to sit down, but there's constant checks, there's weekly check-ins that are happening. And that's happening through, basically through messaging systems, and we're exchanging information. The coach is able to see what's happening through our Red Dot Fitness app with regard to tracking. Habits are in there. Their exercise program, so their fitness coach, or them, if they're managing it, can put in all of their workouts if they're not already pre-programmed for them. So they're logging, and they can be tracking. They can be seeing some results happening in front of them. But more important than that, it's having it there to refer back to, or reference back to, when we're trying to problem solve and continue to move the dial in the right direction. On the Fuel You side of things, what they'll see, which is a little bit different. Again, you can have access to kind of all of those same things, just in a little bit different way. You're just kind of doing it for yourself. So as you're sitting there and you're going through, we provide multiple video presentations, as well as a workbook for what we call the Fuel You student, that has practical application of all the things that we've just talked about. So you get to work through these problems. And when I mean problems, I mean just maybe some of the math problems, maybe some of your history issues, maybe some of your psychology issues and things on your own for you, right? And you're going to be walked through that, both through some reading material, and sometimes that reading material gets a little heavy. So we spend some time with some videos, and once a day you can watch a video, do a little exercise. If you missed a day, no problem. You can go back, you can always review it. And then there's the ability to actually reach out to a coach here if you're stuck or whatever. We encourage people like, hey, get through the program a little bit before you start reaching out, because oftentimes you'll answer your own question, or the program answers that question. But we've done it in a way where, again, people can choose their own adventure. It is not a stop and start, right? It is a journey. So, you can take in this information and utilize it to what works best for you in a way that makes the most sense for you. And again, there's no templates. You're not going to get in there and there's going to be meal plans. This is not what we do. Dude. What we want you to do is figure out how you should be doing that for yourself.
Yeah, everyone wants me to make a meal plan for them. And I said, I don't know what kind of food you like. Yep. I don't know how you want to season something. Like, make all of the food the way you want it to. Usually, most of the time, burnout, they're cooking bland food. They don't really understand, like, I can cook with some spice. Your food should taste good. It really shouldn't be, that bad.
No, again, this is part of the journey and the process. For some people, that's the fun part, actually. Like, I like to cook, and I like to experiment, and I like to do these things. And great. For other people, they can't stand it, and they want a little bit more of an easy button, and they want meal prep. Great. If that fits your lifestyle, it suits you, and you like eating chicken and rice, I can eat chicken and rice, man. I don't.
Especially microwaved.
Yeah, you can
reheated.
And I only say that because it's got negative connotation. Broccoli, chicken, and rice, or whatever. I ate that shit for like 6 years. I can't eat it anymore.
I just had it like 2 hours ago.
But
another favorite part of my job is just, when people, because, at the very beginning, I'll have them track for about a week. I won't give them any goals or anything. I say, just track what you normally eat. I want to see what your day-to-day looks like. And at our first meeting, they're like, I know I shouldn't be eating this. You can eat that. You can have ice cream. That's totally fine. Let's just look at your sugar intake as a whole by the end of the day. Is it crazy? Is it out of control? Then, okay, let's moderate. Right. But I mean, at the end of the day, it's not going to benefit them writing up a meal plan that is drastically different from their day to day. I would much rather just, okay, who are you right now? What little changes do we need to make so that we can get you to your goal? But then you're not banging your head against a wall, shoving more rice down your throat. Right. If you would rather be eating bread, there's different ways. Again, there's different ways to bring the horse to the water,
right? And
That's
so
the coaching, right?
Right, that's the coaching, and that's why eventually we took the time over 2 years in the making of putting together this online program that people could take advantage of, because we recognize like there is no perfect time. So having it there, when it's time for you in a way that you can do it. Like maybe it's on the weekends, maybe it's one night a week, maybe it's on the train on your way to work or whatever it is that you're doing out there, where you can take this in and learn how to do that stuff on your own, but not feel like you're being pressured to do it and have it at hand, right? Cooking, meal prepping, all of that stuff. We're not going to tell you how to cook. You're not going to get a bunch of recipes or anything like that. That's individual stuff, man. And whether we started this out, whether you're a vegetarian or you're fucking carnivore, it's going to help anybody. So hopefully what people have taken away from this is basically sort of the bigger rocks that need to be focused on in order to have long-term dietary and nutrition success, understanding that it's never all about the food, and there are things that you need to and or the exercise. Those are huge factors. They need to be balanced. We do talk about those in depth in any of our programs, and obviously here on the podcast and our YouTube videos. There's so much free content that we put out for people. They can go and get these answers. But if you want it all in one place, we have those things. And, hopefully this encourages people to maybe ask a few more questions, because we love helping people. It's what we do. And we've made it affordable.